have a seat intercepted right on the floor, right? On the floor, right here. I'm gonna sit down and you sit right by me. Crisscross applesauce. Crisscross. I call it hot sauce.
Hot sauce, burnt sauce, yeah. It's all good. Yeah. It's an alliterative thing.
It's okay, guys. We vacuum every day on the floor. It's okay.
Robert.
I'm on this side.
You guys sit right here, right here.
SpongeBob.
Yellow and porous is eating. All right. Well, good morning, class. How are you? Yeah. My name is Ranger Aaron with the National Park Service. I'm a park ranger. I help to interpret, preserve, and protect this park for you, the public, and everyone that comes after us forever. I'm in the forever business. Kind of a long time. There's 418 parks across the country. A lot of amazing stories to learn. Who likes a good story? Right? We all like a good story, right? If you like great stories, come to national parks. It's the best place for amazing stories. Right? Fort Monroe's got a lot of them. You've been hearing some good stories today. All right? Right? This is just the tip of the iceberg. You may recall from your science classes that with an iceberg, where is most of the ice? Yeah, under the water, right? Which means today we've only talked about the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more to learn about Fort Monroe. Keep coming back with your friends and family, okay, guys? So, let's dive into it. Over here. Focus. So, Fort Monroe has got a lot of things. You guys have been learning in your class about the American Indian, right? Powhatan, right? Who was Powhatan's daughter? Pocahontas. Who was Pocahontas' good friend?
John Smith.
John Smith, right? Who was Pocahontas' husband?
I forgot that one.
John.
John Rolfe.
Yeah, John Rolfe, exactly.
Yeah, I got it.
Exactly. All right, good. Focus. I'll be here longer than you will.
Oh my goodness.
Kids,
That's
listen.
the joke. No, because you guys got to go back to class and school and have lunch, and I'll still be here. No, John Rolfe, right? So there's a lot of these guys have connections to Fort Monroe. The James River has a connection. Right? So there's a lot of these things we're going to be talking about in just a second. So before I get there, though, I want to talk about this. If you've got two words and you're going to describe their meaning and what they mean, how would you describe the relationship between two words when they mean the same thing? What are two words that mean the same thing? What do you call it? Yeah, a synonym. What if they mean the opposite? An antonym. Exactly right. Okay. So, where do you guys live? Hampton, right? Where is Hampton? Where do you find Hampton? How about this? What state do you find Hampton? Virginia. Right. Hampton is in Virginia. Virginia is in. Okay, hold on. Guys, stay with me, okay? Stay with me. It's a lot easier if we're all on the same topic, all right? So, you guys live in Hampton. Hampton is found in what state? And Virginia is found where? There you go, the United States. Outstanding. And the United States is known as the home of the brave and the land of the home of the brave and the land of the free. Land of the free. Land of the free, guys. So we all have what? We all have freedom? Yes, we do. We all have freedom, right? Exactly. So, if you're going to talk about freedom, is freedom a good thing? Yeah. Could you argue it's maybe one of the best things ever? Yeah, it is, right? Because you get to decide where you're going to live, who you're going to love, what job you're going to have when you grow up. All those things for yourself. No one tells you. You get to decide for yourself. Right? That's one of the great things about it. You get to decide for yourself. Okay, so what would be a really good antonym of freedom? What would maybe be a good antonym? Right, slavery is a really good one. Right? There could be other answers, but I think slavery is probably the best answer. Okay. So if freedom was a good thing, what does that mean about slavery? Is it a good thing?
No.
Right, so it's a bad thing, right? So, we're going to talk a little bit about freedom, a little bit about slavery, and how they connect to Fort Monroe, okay guys? So, we kind of next. So, I want to talk to you a little bit about the scene in this painting here. And this painting is kind of helping me to describe the story that we learned, no hands, from John Rolfe, from a letter he writes back to England in 1620. And he writes that in August of 1619, a ship flying a Dutch flag called the White Lion arrived here at Old Point Comfort. And on board that ship were 20 and odd Africans. Okay? Now, don't worry about the odd part. This is sort of an old way of saying about. So he's just really meaning about 20. Okay? And where are those Africans from?
Africa.
Right, they're from Africa. That was kind of a softball question. Right? That was kind of an easy one. Right? So they're from Africa. And were they free in Africa? No? Okay.
They were poor.
Okay, so you're right. They may not have been free in Africa. We don't know exactly the individual story of all of these people, but in generally speaking, yeah, they were probably free, living their own lives, doing whatever they wanted with their families and things. And at some point, through a series of events, they found themselves to be enslaved. And they were then required to get on board a ship and travel across the ocean to Old Point Comfort, where they're getting off on this beach, as you see in this picture. What do you think they were feeling? What do you think they were feeling? Say again? Scared? Oh, yeah, against their will, right? What kind of feelings? Upset maybe? Frightened? Yeah? What about nervous? Maybe?
Yes.
Right? What about happy?
No.
You don't think they're happy at all? You think they might be happy to be off the ship and be on dry land again? So maybe a piece of them, they were probably feeling a whole combination of different feelings all at the same time, right? They were probably confused and uncertain in what was going to happen, right? Did they bring anything with them?
No.
You know, nothing?
A little bit surprised. Probably like boots they had, axes, like arrows.
Well, they probably didn't have axes and arrows because they could have probably used that to try to fight the guys that were enslaving them. But they did bring their language with them, right? They brought their language. They brought their culture, right? Their traditional norms of what they thought society was, all those kinds of things, right? So they did bring something with them. And when they arrived, they were able to start influencing a lot of things. That culture starts to mix with the European culture that is here. From what year did those first Europeans arrive? You don't remember when yeah, I bet you did. You guys have been to Jamestown, haven't you?
Yeah.
So Jamestown is founded when?
1607.
That's when the first Europeans arrived, 1607. Yeah. I just had to ask it a different way. 1607. And the English brought their culture with them too, didn't they?
Yeah.
They sure did. And so that starts influencing the American Indian culture as well. And after today we're the melting pot of the world with cultures and languages all over the place. So this is some of that beginnings of what that would be. But just as important, or even more so, than the cultural arrival of the first Africans, this is the very first time that these peoples from Africa would be here forever. And what happens to them? That opinion, those emotions they're feeling, what would happen? So when they leave Africa and they are enslaved and they arrive here, the interesting question is, do they think they know what their future is?
No.
No. They don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. They don't know what's going to happen next. They probably don't even speak the same language as even themselves. They might be different from different cultures and tribes in Africa too. It's hard to know. But they don't know what's going to happen. And so, Could this be the beginning of slavery starting in the English colony? Perhaps, because there is no slavery legally in the English colony at this time when these first Africans arrived. There is no slavery here. So could that also mean then that slavery would start, or could it mean that the people who are enslaved would need to become free because there's no slavery here? It's hard to know what exactly would happen, what would be the result. Fortunately for you and I, we can look back at documents and the stories and the histories to learn a little bit more. And what we know from the arrival of these individuals and some of the folks coming shortly thereafter is a little bit about what does happen. What we know is that this is not the beginning of slavery in the English colony. Okay? But it does lead to it. Okay? They are no longer enslaved after that ship leaves because there's no slavery here. Slavery does not become legal in the English colony until 1655, over 30 years later. So it takes time to evolve and change for slavery to become legal. So what is their immediate future? Their immediate future is much like a lot of other people coming from Europe and other places that find themselves wanting to come to the New World, or in the case of these Africans, not wanting to, but are here. But they end up working for someone for a period of time, usually 5 to 7 years. They're fed, they're given a place to stay, they're told what to do, and they basically have to do whatever they're told for that period of time. And it's something called an indentured servant. Okay? And the main difference between the Europeans is they're agreeing to do so voluntarily, where the Africans are not given that choice. But they're pretty much being treated the same. And it's not exactly freedom, it's not exactly slavery, it's kind of something in between freedom and slavery. Okay? But it is a specific period of time, and we know that that's the case because other Africans that are arriving shortly after end up owning their own land and own plantations that have European and Africans working for them, both as free persons and indentured. And so that helps to confirm that understanding. Right? But by 1655, slavery is now legal, and all of those Africans that are arriving after that point are in fact enslaved in many cases for the rest of their lives. And it becomes what we think about. When you guys have seen movies and heard stories, it all confirms the one fact that we know about slavery because it's the antonym of freedom, that it is in fact bad, right? It's not good. And it has a lot of different ways that it might be practiced, but it's never good because you're not free. But what I want to talk to you about is the next part of the story. Where does it go? Okay? So 1619, the first African people arrived, but where does that story go? That story leads us to this, some 5th grade stuff. So bear with me, but it's talking about the American Civil War, fought between the southern states that want to leave the United States and create their own country where slavery is legal, and the northern states that want to end that struggle and have the country as one. And if saying slavery should be outlawed is the way to do that, that's what they want to do. And into that story is 3 men that I want to talk about, and then to be followed by a 4th. Can I have your eyes, please? So, 3 men, Frank Baker, James Townsend, and Shepard Mallory. They are, like you, persons that live here in Hampton, but unlike you and I, are not free. They are enslaved and have been sent to gun positions for the Confederates to fire cannons at Fort Monroe. This was the United States fort. All right? They were wanting to end slavery and keep the country together as one. So their efforts were directly endangering this fort. In the middle of the night, May 23rd, 1861, they find a small rowboat and steal themselves away, coming towards the lighthouse here at Fort Monroe, towards the United States and the Union Army here at Fort Monroe. And they enter the story is this gentleman, Benjamin F. Butler, the base commander of the fort, and who was #1 order when he was sent here was to not let the enemy build batteries to fire at the fort. It's a bigger picture right here. So, not let the enemy build gun positions to fire at Fort Monroe. And that's exactly what the 3 men had been sent to do, wasn't it? They were building gun positions to fire at the fort. All right? When they get to the front gates, they ask for protection And Benjamin Butler has an interview with them. Please don't lean on the floor. Thank you. And he has an interview with them in his office. And he hears their story, what they've seen, what they've done, where they've gone, all those kinds of things. And he hears what their request is. And their request is for protection and freedom. Now, to help you understand where I'm going with this, okay, remember what Benjamin Butler's #1 order was? Not to let people build batteries to fire at the fort. And that's what these 3 men have been doing. So, in order to fulfill his #1 order, it makes sense to keep these 3 men. If you're going to have an argument with somebody and they're hitting you with a stick, if you get the stick from them, are you going to give it back? Of course not. In that analogy, these 3 men are the stick. So he is not going to give it back to build more gun emplacements to fire at the fort. And by doing so, he gives them protection. And he says when the law changes, hopefully at the end of the war, you can become free. The next day, 9 show up, then 40. By the weekend, 100. By the next week, 500 have arrived. Thank you. And then thousands, then tens of thousands of freedom seekers are flocking to Fort Monroe. And across the country, when the policy changes for the Army to offer protection, anywhere the United States Army is, thousands and thousands of people find protection and freedom with the United States Army. And this decision that is made by Benjamin Butler and the actions of those 3 men, Baker, Townsend, and Mallory, here at Fort Monroe, is the very first step towards the beginning of the end of slavery in the United States. So if you recall, at the very beginning, we were talking about the arrival of the first Africans in 1619 and what would become the beginning of slavery 30 years later. And then you have the very beginning of the end of slavery in the exact same spot with the contraband decision. Kind of an amazing story that you could have the whole arc of the beginning and ending of slavery in the same place, isn't it? So as I mentioned, there's so much more to learn. Keep coming back to Fort Monroe. Bring your family, bring your friends. I can't tell you everything today, but I appreciate you guys listening to my part of the story. And I hope you had a good field trip. Yeah?